Welcome to the ESOP Minicast. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Bret Keisling, and as it says on my business cards, I'm a passionate advocate for employee ownership. I want to take a few minutes today to congratulate and celebrate Project Equity on recently reaching its 10th anniversary. On April 1st, 2014, Project Equity co-founders Hilary, Abell, and Alison Lingane began working part-time. In its first year, they conducted their own feasibility study, looking for different strategies to scale employee ownership. They created a Worker Co-ops Academy pilot project with partners in Oakland, California, and began articulating the organizational mission and values. Fast forward to today, and Project Equity has 30 team members in what is primarily a virtual organization. They've worked with local and national partners throughout the United States. They've educated 15,000 people about employee ownership over the past 10 years, and they provide technical assistance to 30 to 40 companies annually in various parts of their EO transition journey. Alison Lingane appeared on episode 112 of our primary EO ESOP podcast, and Hilary Abell appeared the next week on episode 113. They've each been back a couple of times since. Evan Edwards became CEO of Project Equity in 2022, and I'm so grateful that he's appeared on several episodes as well. If you check out the show notes for this episode, we'll include links to the various episodes they've appeared on. Or if you go to www.esoppodcast.com and enter Project Equity in the search bar, you'll find the episodes they've appeared on, as well as times I've talked about Project Equity on my own. Regular listeners of the podcast know that I love a good origin story, and on episode 112, Alison Lingane shared Project Equity's. Here's an excerpt from 2020. I hope you'll enjoy Project Equity's origin story.
In my previous minicast, I did a profile of Project Equity and talked about you and your co-founder, Hilary Abell, and wanted to have you come on and just talk about how you got to where you are and where you're going with Project Equity. But Alison, you have a fascinating story that I read in one of your bios online. You got a college degree, ended up getting an MBA, but your path seems to be a realization that opportunities that were open to you were not necessarily open to other people. Am I kind of, in short and sweet, summing up your journey a little bit?
Yeah. And then, it's really interesting because I often describe sort of how I ended up in the employee ownership space as really stumbling into it, which kind of frames up for me why Project Equity exists and the challenge that I think we have in the employee ownership space. But I stumbled into it in a good ways into my career when a colleague introduced me to Hilary Abell, my co-founder at Project Equity. And, I had been in the business world for about 20 years. It was the first that I had heard about this approach to organizing a business called employee ownership. As you mentioned, after getting my MBA at UC Berkeley, which had a very vibrant community of MBA students really focused on and interested in responsible business, but there was no mention of employee ownership. And following getting my MBA, I worked for about 15 years in mission-driven companies, and again, never heard about employee ownership. And so once I started to learn about it after meeting Hilary, for me, it just really clicked because this is a business model in which business decisions are made through the lens of what's good for the employee, and so by extension, their families, their communities. It's a business model that has both financial and professional opportunity for employees built right into its DNA. A business model that creates quality jobs with a financial safety net. And so, at the end of the day, it's not surprising, given all of this, that employee-owned businesses also outperform their competitors, are more efficient, are themselves more resilient, and are ultimately stronger companies. And, so this all sounds terrific, but why doesn't anybody know about it? That's ultimately the big question that landed for me after I got my head into, what employee ownership is. Why don't more people know about it? Because it really seems like the best kept secret in the business world. And, my question is, well, what's holding it back?
So congratulations to everyone at Project Equity. Hilary Abell and Alison Lingane, who had the vision and acted on it, to current CEO Evan Edwards, and to all of their team members, past and present, who've done such an incredible job supporting and growing employee ownership in all its forms. I celebrate you, I thank you, and I appreciate you all. With that, we'll wrap up this episode of the minicast. Thank you so much for listening. This is Bret Keisling. Be well.
We'd love to hear from you. You can find us on Facebook at EO Podcast Network and on Twitter at ESOP Podcast. This podcast has been produced by Bret Keisling for the EO Podcast Network. Original music composed by Max Keisling. Branding and marketing by Bitsy Plus Design. And I'm Bitsy McCann.